I used to think hell only existed in the Bible. But no, I lived in it, for the first 18 years of my life. And the devil took the form of a younger brother, with a fake smile and the kind of eyes my mother always called angel. If anyone ever asked me why I don't believe in the idea that family is where you belong, this is my answer. There's nothing scarier than a family that knows how to hide cruelty under a mask of love. Especially when you're the only one in the house seen as a burden. I was the eldest child in a middle-class family in Wisconsin, USA. I was born 3 years before Levi, my younger brother, but from the day he cried for the first time, I became a shadow in my own home. My mother always said Levi was sensitive and needed special attention. Every time he cried, whether from tripping or breaking his own toys and blaming me, I was dragged into the living room to have a talk. In my house, having a talk meant my mother would scream until her throat was raw, while I stood there, hands clenched, trying not to cry. Levi was a master manipulator. He knew how to cry on cue, when to bow his head and fake remorse, and most importantly, he knew exactly who was backing him. I still remember clearly my 12th birthday. Levi deliberately ruined the custom birthday cake my mom had ordered. When I screamed in frustration, my mom didn't ask what happened. She just slapped me and coldly said, "You're a big girl now, don't be so selfish, your brother's still little." Things like that happened so often, I stopped being surprised. I used to have a cat named Ginger, the only little soul in the house I ever felt close to. And one afternoon, I came home from school to find Ginger locked inside the washing machine. She was alive, but so terrified she wouldn't come near anyone anymore. I knew who did it, Levi giggled while I cried, and when I screamed that he was a monster, my mother stepped in front of him and growled, "If you say something like that again, I'll send you to juvenile detention." My father, he didn't say a word. He was there in the house, but almost invisible. The way he shrugged, turned on the TV, and walked away while I begged to be heard, hurt more than any slap. To him, Levi was the son he always wanted. I was just the troublesome daughter. I learned to stay silent at 13. I stopped telling anyone about what Levi did to me at school, I hid my journals under the mattress, and I started staying up late just to avoid spending time in the living room with everyone else. Levi only got worse as he grew older. He smashed my phone because he didn't like the case color, told his friends I was a weirdo who talked to herself, and worst of all, he dated my best friend. And, when she chose to believe his sweet lies over 5 years of friendship, I realized, to most people, I'd always be the one easiest to leave behind. I'm not sure when I started to hate Levi, but I remember exactly when I started to hate myself. It was the night I begged my mother not to hit me for breaking a vase, even though it was Levi who kicked it over during a tantrum. My mother stood in the middle of the house, holding a broom, and said, "If you won't take responsibility, then don't bother eating dinner." I went to bed hungry. Levi got 2 servings because he's growing. I knew I had to escape that place, but how do you escape when the whole world thinks you live in a perfect family? I didn't think life could get worse than being the leftover in your own home. Then came 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across America like a never-ending nightmare. And I, like millions of others, became a victim of a free fall. When the flower shop I'd worked at for 6 years was forced to close indefinitely, I naively thought, just a few weeks. But weeks turned into months. My boss sent a short email, terminated my contract without notice, and just like that, I lost my only source of income. I was 28, no savings, no house. My roommate moved back in with her parents in Minnesota, and I stood in an empty apartment in Milwaukee, listening to the faint hum of the fridge, like the final breath of a stable life. I sold everything I could, my desk, printer, the rare book collection I'd treasured since high school. Eventually, all I had left were a few clothes, a backpack of personal items, and the old camper I'd bought last year. To try camping and feel free. Ironically, it became the only place I had left to call home. I remember clearly the day I called my mom, my voice trembling like a lost child. "Mom, can I park my camper in your driveway for a little while? I don't need to come inside, it's just, I have nowhere else to go." There was silence on the other end, then her tired sigh. "Amelia, you're an adult now and still can't take care of yourself? We don't have space. Don't be a burden." I swallowed hard. "It's just parking, Mom, it won't cost you anything." She laughed, cold as ice. "Parking? That piece of mobile trash, the neighbors will think we're housing a homeless person." Don't embarrass me. I don't know what hurt more, the rejection or the disgust in her laugh. Probably both. I hung up, gripping the steering wheel like I could crush something, but there was nothing to crush except my own heart. Levi, of course, didn't miss the chance to twist the knife. He texted me a selfie of the whole family. Him, Sil, his wife, and their twin kids having dinner. In the photo, scribbled on the chalkboard behind them were the words, "Family dinner. Where people of value belong." Right below was the message. "Looks like the camper's gonna be your new best friend, congrats." That night, I crawled into the camper, parked temporarily in a Walmart lot, and pulled the curtains tight like the world outside was a wild animal waiting to tear me apart. I had never known a night so long, so cold, and so empty. The wind howled through the cracks, unfamiliar footsteps echoed outside, and loneliness filled the space like water flooding a sinking apartment. I couldn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because the shame was too heavy, eating away at me like termites hollowing wood from the inside out. The next day, I began the life of an urban ghost, moving from one parking lot to another, avoiding security guards, hiding my existence like I was a criminal. To get electricity, I had to secretly run a cable from an old gas station nearby. To shower, I asked for guest passes at cheap gyms. And to stay sane, I taped a piece of paper with a scribbled message on the camper wall. "This is only temporary." But temporary lasted 7 months. I had never felt so small. No one called, no one asked, not a single person from my family texted, not even to check in. To them, I had disappeared, and they were fine with that. If you ever asked me why I didn't go back, this is why. When you fall into the deepest hole of your life, the first person to kick you isn't society. It's the people who call themselves family. There were mornings I woke up in the old camper, drenched in sweat from the suffocating summer heat, my throat dry and my head spinning after a restless night in a parking lot. There were winter nights I wrapped myself in 2 layers of old blankets, clutching a hot water bottle like it was the only warm thing left in a freezing life. Survival. That was all I thought about for nearly half a year. No dreams, no hopes. Just survive. I learned how to secretly plug into outside outlets behind quiet stores, only charging for 3 hours at a time to avoid getting caught. I carefully found gyms with 7-day free trial policies and used different names and emails to stretch out my access to showers. I memorized which parking lots had the least patrolling at night. Which public restrooms stayed clean after 9 p.m. I became a shadow drifting through the city I once proudly called home. Now, I was just a 28-year-old woman with no money, no family, and no hope. But in the middle of all that ash, a small spark began to glow. I stumbled across a job posting taped to the window of a small print company in the suburbs of Waukesha. Position: warehouse assistant, lifting, inventory, document delivery. I walked in wearing a faded jacket, a gaunt face, and dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights. The receptionist looked me up and down, frowned, and then called the manager. 3 days later, I started working. The pay was low, the shifts were 10 hours long, and my legs felt like they were being crushed after each shift. But I didn't complain. I arrived early, worked hard, and always volunteered for extra tasks. I cleaned the warehouse, mopped the floors, even patched up a jammed loading door using scraps of wood I found at a junkyard. One afternoon, Mr. Paul, the warehouse supervisor, caught me hauling boxes after hours. He frowned. "What are you still doing here?" I told him the truth. About the camper. About how I was living behind a truck. About sleeping behind Walmart lots, like a sun-faring rat. He didn't say a word, just nodded and walked away. The next morning, I was called into the office. I thought I was getting fired. But no. Mr. Paul had asked the director for permission to let me park my camper behind the company lot, near the warehouse, where it was under surveillance and had access to a power outlet. I almost burst into tears on the spot. From that day forward, I had a stable parking spot, electricity, and access to the employee restroom. Every morning, I was the first one in the warehouse. Every night, I was the last to leave the office, heading straight to the back lot, where my camper sat in the dark. But my heart had never felt brighter. Over time, I stopped being the helper. I learned how to operate the machines, understood the inventory system, and mastered efficient shipping. I took notes on everything, proactively suggested small improvements to increase productivity. Gradually, people at the company started remembering my name, not out of pity, but because they saw I earned it. After 10 months, I was promoted to team lead of the inventory group. I could hardly believe it when the director handed me the decision. I still remember what he said. "Someone like you. If you didn't break after everything you've been through, then nothing in this world can ever beat you." 1 year after getting the job, I held the keys to the first house I had ever owned. A 3-bedroom home in the outskirts of New Berlin, just a 10-minute drive from work. Not big, not fancy, but it was mine, earned completely by me. I parked the familiar camper in the backyard and stared at it under the sunset. It had once been a temporary shelter, now a memory, proof that I didn't give up. And then, in a stupid moment, I posted a picture of the new house on social media. A few days later, the old nightmare came knocking. I should have known. I should have stayed quiet. Just one photo of the new house, one short caption on Facebook. Finally, after all these years, I have a place to call home. And just 3 days later, the doorbell rang loudly in the middle of Sunday afternoon. When I opened the door, I froze. My parents, Dan, the golden boy little brother, and Sil, his wife who always treated me like a rag under her feet, were standing right there on my porch, holding their youngest child, with the other 3 clinging to their legs like hungry kittens. "Amelia, oh my God, this house is so cute," my mom squealed, her eyes scanning the living room. And without waiting for an invitation, she and the rest of them walked right in like it had always been their property. Sil smirked, her eyes scrutinizing every corner of the house. I knew that look. The kind someone gives when they're sizing up how they'd arrange furniture in a place that isn't theirs. I hadn't even had time to ask how they found the address when Dan patted my shoulder. Sugar sweet. "Hey sis, we were thinking, maybe you could move back into the camper for a while and we could stay in the house. You're living alone, and we've got 4 kids. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. "Are you serious, Dan? This is my house. I just bought it with money I earned. What are you people thinking?" My mom cut in, her voice soft like she was soothing a child. "You're living alone. 3 bedrooms is such a waste. Dan and the kids are all cramped in our place. You used to live in the camper, remember? It was fine then." Sil curled her lips. "What's the difference? You're used to living like that anyway. Plus, this place is close to Dan's job. Super convenient." I stood in the middle of the living room, heart pounding, trying to stay calm. "No. This is my house. I lived like a stray dog for 2 years to get this. No one gets to show up and tell me to move out." Dan's tone changed, the sweetness gone. "You're so selfish, Amelia. When you needed us, we were still there. Now we need something and you won't give anything back?" "When I needed you? When I knocked on your door that winter night with the camper? Who turned me away? Who laughed in my face and called me a failure? Now that I finally have a house, suddenly I'm supposed to share?" No one said anything, not one person could argue back. My mother started her usual act, crocodile tears, a choked-up voice. "It breaks my heart to see you so cold to your own family. can't you do just a little something for Dan? I exhaled sharply and turned toward the door. Get out of my house, right now. Sil stepped forward, eyes blazing. You're really kicking your own family out? You lived like a damn dog for years and now you've got a little house and think you're better than everyone? I don't think I'm better. But I don't owe any of you a damn thing. And then, without warning, without hesitation, Sil lunged and slapped me across the face. I stumbled, my back hitting the edge of the table. In the daze, I saw Dan holding her back as she thrashed and screamed like she'd lost her mind. I quietly pulled out my phone and hit record. If you're not out of my house in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. Silence. No one dared take another step. I looked at my mother. You used to say I was a burden. Now that I have a house, suddenly I'm a bank. Do you even realize how disgusting that is? My father pulled my mother out. Dan's face was bright red as he backed away carrying his child, Sil still screaming and cursing, but silenced by a shout from my dad. Before they left, my mother turned back and whispered, "You'll regret this. One day you'll need your family again." I simply replied, "I've lived without you all for years, trust me, I won't need you again." The door slammed shut. And for the first time in years, I didn't shake after standing up to them. As soon as the sound of Dan's tires faded down the street, I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and collapsed onto the couch. My face was still burning from Sil's slap, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the rage boiling inside me. With trembling hands, I opened the video I had recorded. The footage was clear, the audio was crisp. Sil's shameless face, my mother's screeching voice, Dan's entitled demands. Everything was captured on this little phone. No. I wouldn't let them spin the story again. Not this time. I opened my laptop, pulled up social media. My hands shook as I typed the first line. But the more I wrote, the more I felt myself reclaiming the power they'd crushed in me since childhood. This is the truth about how my parents, my brother Dan and his wife Sil, showed up at my house and tried to take my property, baldly and violently. I recounted every detail, leaving nothing out. I attached the video, the moment Sil lunged and slapped me, my mother saying, "Do it for Dan," and Dan's cold face as he said, "You don't need to pay rent." It was all right there. I posted it at 8 p.m. By 9 p.m. my phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages. Calls. Comments. I didn't know how explosive the post would be, but clearly, neither did my family. That night, my cousin Lisa messaged first. "Oh my God, Amelia, are you serious? Is that real? I just watched the video, I'm shaking with anger." I replied, "You think I could make that up?" And then the messages came pouring in. Aunts, uncles, distant relatives I never thought would speak up, all sent messages of support. "You've been through too much, Amelia. I knew your parents favored Dan, but I didn't realize they'd go this far. You did the right thing, no one has the right to take away what you earned." One of the first to share the post was my aunt, my mother's younger sister, the one my mom despises because she's always been fair. She wrote a sentence that made me cry. "Never let anyone steal what you bled and cried to build. I'm proud of you, Amelia." I knew my mother wouldn't stay silent, and sure enough, the next morning she posted a message full of sweet lies. Unheartbroken that my daughter would shame her family over a small misunderstanding, we were only trying to help her brother, a hard-working man with 4 small kids. But that post sank in a storm of backlash. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone had heard the audio. There was no way for them to clean up this mess. Dozens of comments refuted her directly under the post, most from people who had stayed quiet for years. "You call that helping? Looked like trying to take over to me. Good thing Amelia had proof, otherwise you'd still be manipulating like always." Dan chose silence, no excuses, no apology. Sil did exactly what I expected, she deleted all her social media. On the 3rd day, someone I never expected, Uncle Matthew, called me. He's my dad's older brother, the one who always kept his distance during family gatherings. His voice was deep but firm. "I saw everything. If you need a lawyer, just say the word. I know a few good ones." I nearly choked up. I didn't think you'd take my side. You were wrong. I stayed silent for too long. But this time, I can't. I sat in front of my computer, looking at the post that had been shared nearly 4,000 times. The messages kept coming. But the most important thing wasn't the attention. It was that I had finally found my voice. For the first time in years, I felt not alone. And more than anything, I knew this time they wouldn't dare come back so easily. I thought that after I exposed everything, they'd be too ashamed to show their faces. I was too naive. A week later, on Saturday morning, I came home from yoga and froze when I saw a U-Haul truck parked right in front of my house. Dane was struggling to pull a sofa toward the front door, while Sil stood in the yard, hands on her hips, glaring at me like she'd just been appointed homeowner by the president himself. I slammed the brakes. My heart thundered in my chest. "What the hell are you doing here?" I screamed, throwing open the car door. Dan looked at me, completely unfazed, as if this were all perfectly normal. "We're moving in, Amelia. You know this house is way too big for one person." Sil cut in, her voice sharp and high-pitched. "Exactly. And since Mom said you'd do the right thing, we decided to go ahead before you changed your mind." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You people are insane. This is my house. Who gave you the right?" Dan pulled out a stack of papers, waving them in front of me like some cheap magic trick. "We have a lease agreement, legal, signed by you." I snatched it out of his hand. One glance was all I needed. That signature wasn't mine, not even a bad copy. It was blatant forgery. I was speechless for a few seconds. My whole body trembled with rage. "You forged documents? Don't mess with me." I immediately pulled out my phone, started recording the whole scene, then dialed 911. Sil started to panic, rushing over and banging on my car window. "No, you can't do that, Amelia. We have little kids. You're tearing apart a family." I clenched my jaw, leaving the call on speaker. "If you touch my car again, I'll add vandalism to the list." When the police arrived, I explained everything: the previous video, the social media post, the fake lease with the forged signature. A young officer frowned, holding up the document. "You're saying you didn't sign this?" "Absolutely not. I even have video of their last visit. No one mentioned anything about a lease." I provided examples of my actual signature. The difference was obvious. Undeniable. Dan stood frozen like a statue. Sil began crying, wailing about how cruel and heartless I was. But her words carried no weight, not with the officers, and especially not with the security camera I had installed just last week. I pointed at the newly changed lock. "Check this out. They replaced my front door lock, left the old one and the drill bits right there on the porch. That's forced entry." The older officer nearby nodded, his voice heavy. "We'll ask them to leave immediately. If they don't comply, you have every right to file charges for forgery and trespassing." Sil thrushed and shouted. "He's your brother, Amelia. How can you be so heartless?" I replied coldly. "I owe nothing to any of you, especially when you treat me like a walking a..." After 2 chaotic hours, they were forced to load everything back into the truck. The police stood by until Dan threw the new house keys onto my lawn, and the whole crew drove off in fury. The very next morning, I changed all the locks. Then I posted a short message online. Some people don't understand boundaries, so they need to be taught by the law. This time the response from relatives was even stronger than before. No one defended my parents or Dan anymore. One cousin from San Diego commented, "Better this, we're done calling them family." "I'm so sorry, Amelia, but you stood up so fiercely." I knew then there would be no more full family Thanksgiving dinners. But that was a loss I was more than willing to accept. Because finally, I had protected what I worked for, and no one was ever going to take it from me again. I thought things ended the day the cops kicked them off my property. But turns out, that was just the opening act of a full-blown family tragedy. And the most humiliating downfall of Dan? The once beloved golden child. It all started a few months after the break-in. I got a strange message from an anonymous account. Just one sentence. "Did you know Syl's youngest isn't Dan's?" I nearly dropped my phone. My first reaction wasn't shock, it was amusement. So much so that I had to sit down and laugh in disbelief. Then the rumor spread like wildfire. Soon everyone in the extended family was whispering, while Syl stayed completely silent online. A silence that spoke volumes. Until finally Dan, the man who once looked me dead in the eye and demanded I do the right thing, broke his silence. He held a small family meeting and revealed the DNA test results. The first 3 kids were his, but the youngest, a 6-month-old baby girl, had no biological connection to him at all. The atmosphere at the family meeting froze over like ice. I wasn't there, but I heard that Dan slammed the DNA test results down on the table and said, "I was a fool who trusted the wrong person. And I'm going to make it right." Syl denied everything at first, cried, blamed it all on a moment of weakness. But Dan wasn't the clueless guy he used to be. He had gathered evidence, texts, bank records, even footage from the doorbell camera, proving Syl had been cheating for nearly a year. I heard my parents stayed completely silent during that meeting. Maybe the shock hit harder than even the public disgrace of the house incident. Dan filed for divorce immediately, since Syl had a prior assault record. From the time she hit me, now officially documented, Dan was granted custody of the 3 kids. Syl lost primary custody, and was only allowed supervised visits. On the day of the court hearing, Syl showed up alone. The man she had cheated with? Disappeared. Rumor had it, he blocked her number and all social media. By the end of the trial, Syl had lost not only her husband and her children, but was also fined for violating the conditions of her bail related to the earlier assault. She was held in jail for 3 days. And just like that, the name Sylvia Monroe now had an additional line in the public record. Domestic violence conviction. Afterward, Syl moved back in with her parents in a small town about 2 hours away. On social media, she started posting long, drawn-out rants about how life is unfair, women are mistreated, and how she had been stripped of everything. But no one cared anymore. The people who used to comment with sympathy slowly disappeared. Relatives who once trusted her started blocking her outright. One time, I came across one of her posts by accident. A blurry photo of a messy living room with a tearful caption underneath. "If only people knew I never had a choice." I just smiled. She did have a choice. But she chose to hurt others, and now she wanted pity. Dan, meanwhile, remained silent online. No posts, no comments. But a few months later, I received a message from him. "Amelia, I'm sorry for everything I did." I didn't reply. Not out of hatred, but because I needed time. After all, those 3 children weren't at fault. And whether I liked it or not, Dan was still my brother. The downfall of Syl and Dan didn't bring me joy. But it gave me something. The confirmation that, despite being pushed aside for years, I had lived with integrity and come out stronger than ever. I don't know what made them change. Maybe it was Dan's crash and burn. Maybe it was when the whole family turned their backs, and they experienced for the first time, complete isolation. One afternoon in June, I was planting more lavender in the corner of my yard when my mother showed up. She stood at the white picket fence, wearing a simple long dress, no longer the woman with bright red lipstick and eyes sharp as razors. She called out softly, "Molia." I looked up. "What do you need?" She bowed her head, her eyes red. "I'm sorry, for everything." I was stunned. In all of my 34 years, it was the first time she had ever said those 2 words to me. A few days later, my parents came over, this time by my invitation. No more commands, no more arrogance. They sat at my dinner table like 2 worn-out people who'd just been through a storm. My father, the man who once yelled at me like I was a beggar, slowly spoke. "We were wrong. Wrong for spoiling Dan. Wrong for expecting you to sacrifice without complaint." My mother nodded, quietly wiping away tears. "We were narcissists," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't see that you were drowning." They told me that after everything, they started going to church. They met a young pastor, one who didn't lecture or judge, but asked them only one question. When was the last time you truly listened to your daughter? I didn't forgive them right away. But I listened. I wanted to see if this was just a performance for redemption, or a real awakening. As for Dan, he was quieter now. No more inflated ego, no more wife to lean on, no more defenders. He moved into the old camper, the same one I had once slept in during countless freezing nights in the Walmart parking lot. He asked to borrow it because his 3 kids needed a proper place to sleep, and he wanted to give the main bedroom to his eldest son, who was now a teenager. I didn't say much, just nodded. Don't mess it up, Dan, that camper kept me alive for a whole year. He didn't reply, but I saw it in those once arrogant eyes, now filled with quiet gratitude and genuine remorse. My life, finally, was on the path I had always dreamed of. The 3-bedroom house wasn't just a home anymore, it became a haven for true friends. I rented out the extra 2 rooms to my best friends Emily, a music teacher, and Laura, a librarian recently divorced. We lived together like a little chosen family, warm, joyful. Friday nights were movie night, complete with popcorn, pizza, and so much laughter we couldn't breathe. No one here was jealous. No one made me give up my bed. No one called me a burden. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was chosen, not obligated. On social media, I shared my story, not for revenge, but to let others who were overlooked by their families know, you deserve happiness, even if you have to start from zero. Relatives slowly began reaching out again. Those who once believed Syl's lies, who once doubted me, started sending apologies. Some came to my house, bringing apple pie, flowers, or just a hug full of regret. My Aunt Nancy, the one who once told me, "Don't stir up family drama," hugged me for a long time and said, "You're stronger than anyone in this family, Amelia." And now, the whole family knows it. I still haven't completely forgiven, but I gave them, all of them, a chance. And most importantly, I no longer live to please anyone. I live for me. I wasn't surprised when one morning I walked outside and found my Subaru covered in raw eggs. Broken shells, gooey whites and yolks smeared across the windshield and hood. The stench spread quickly in the hot sun. The sight was both pathetic and ironic. I knew exactly who did it. No one else, but Syl. She thought throwing eggs would make me snap, lose control like she had that day in my front yard. But all I did was take out my phone, snap a photo, give a faint smile, and drive the car to the car wash. Oh, I didn't post it online, I didn't call the police, I didn't confront her. I simply didn't care. Syl can hate me. She can blame the world for everything that happened. But I no longer live in her world. I've stepped into a new chapter. Ever since Dan was granted custody of the kids after the divorce, I'd watched him change, bit by bit. The arrogance, the entitlement, the irresponsibility, gone. In their place was a man who looked confused, anxious, and genuinely trying. I saw him taking the kids to school every morning, patiently waiting while they picked out clothes, tied their shoes, packed their lunches. He didn't yell anymore. He didn't blame others. Every time he saw me, Dan just gave a small nod, his silent way of saying thank you. I still kept my house, still tended my garden, still hosted backyard BBQ nights with friends. And most importantly, I held on to my inner peace. I no longer held hatred. I used to think I'd never get over the anger. Toward my parents, toward Dan, toward Syl, and even toward myself for staying silent so long. But one day, as I sat watching old recordings, videos of shouting, insults, violence, I just felt tired. I didn't want to carry it all anymore. I didn't need revenge to prove anything. The peace I now lived in, that was already the clearest victory. And then, something I didn't expect happened. I began to feel love for my nieces and nephew. At first I kept my distance. I was afraid I'd grow too attached and end up getting pulled back into family manipulation. But those kids, they were just young souls, needing a safe place. One Saturday evening, Dan brought them over for pizza. The youngest, Ellie, hugged me tightly and whispered, "Aunt Amelia, I like your house. It feels warmer than ours." I pulled her into my arms. My heart melted. Slowly I learned to open my heart again, but this time, only to those who deserved it. To innocent children who knew nothing of the mistakes the adults had made. To the friends who had always stood by me. Not for gain. Not because of blood. And to myself, the woman who was once thrown to the curb, who slept in a camper through winter nights, who was insulted by her own flesh and blood. I don't know if my parents have truly changed for good, or if Dan will always be a good father, or if Sil will try to cause trouble again. Life never gives guarantees. But I do know this. I survived. I stood up, and I will never let anyone define my worth again. That night, after cleaning up the backyard from a small gathering, I sat alone under the warm glow of the patio light, holding a cup of hot tea, listening to the distant chirping of crickets. The sky was full of stars. The breeze was gentle. And for the first time in many years, I felt truly free. If someone asked me if I regretted losing a family like that, I would smile and answer, no, because in the end, I built a family I chose. My story isn't just about the journey from pain to freedom, it's proof that you don't have to accept toxic relationships just because they're family. I learned to stand up on my own, rebuild my life from scratch, and find peace in the home I created for myself. A real family isn't a place where you feel small or used. It's where you're respected, loved, and free to be yourself. And I chose that. For me. What do you think about Amelia's journey and the choices she made? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more powerful real-life stories and meaningful lessons about family, love, and self-worth. I always knew my sister Vanessa would find a way to sabotage my wedding, but I didn't expect her to stoop to such a cowardly and shameless level. If you think TV dramas exaggerate sibling jealousy, then welcome to my world, where an Ivy League degree isn't enough to protect you from the backstabbing of your own family. It all started when I introduced the man I loved to my family, Brandon, a man who, on the surface, was just a bartender at a small riverside bar in Charleston, and that was also the moment I officially became a disgrace in Vanessa's eyes. My name is Catherine Miller. I'm 31 years old and a high school literature teacher at a small private school in South Carolina. I love my job. Not for the prestige, but for the light in my students' eyes when they grasp a difficult passage, or the heartfelt teenage confessions tucked into their essays. I also love Brandon. A warm, intelligent, and patient man who came into my life when I had almost lost faith in lasting love. The only thing is, he's better at mixing cocktails than wearing a suit, and to Vanessa, that's an unforgivable sin. Vanessa is 4 years older than me, the kind of woman who always shows up in designer dresses, flawlessly polished nails, and a smile that makes you feel like you're being judged down to the last millimeter. After graduating college, she married an investment banker in Atlanta and moved into a mansion with a heated pool and 2 dogs with French names. To her, everything in life has a price, and anything without a luxury label doesn't deserve to exist. When I told my family I was dating a bartender, my mom gave a strained smile, and my dad frowned, but Vanessa outright laughed. "You're kidding, right, Kat?" she said, setting her wineglass down as if I had just insulted the drink itself. "You graduated from Columbia, and you're dating a bartender? Why not go all in and date a plumber while you're at it?" I tried to stay calm. Brandon isn't just a bartender. He's studying business and working to pay his own tuition. He has goals, passion, and most importantly, he treats me like a human being. Something I'm not sure you know how to do anymore. Vanessa tilted her head, lips curled like I had just misquoted Shakespeare. "Oh, how touching. But this relationship isn't going anywhere, Catherine. People don't climb the social ladder with love. You're going downhill and you don't even realize it." I wanted to scream in her face that not everyone lives for the so-called social ladder, that some people choose kindness over stepping on others to get ahead. But I knew, to Vanessa, kindness was always a secondary language. The first time Vanessa met Brandon was at my dad's 62nd birthday party. Brandon wore a simple white shirt and brought a handcrafted bottle of liquor he had made himself. A small gift with a thoughtful message. Vanessa looked him up and down, eyes scanning him like a price check barcode. "Catherine says you're a bartender," she asked, voice sweet as artificial sugar. "Then I guess you're good at pouring drinks, huh?" Brandon just smiled. "Not bad, as long as I don't spill it on someone's silk dress." I nearly burst out laughing, and Vanessa turned red, though she forced a smile like it was a compliment. From that day on, I knew Vanessa would never stop digging. Things got worse when Brandon and I announced our engagement. Vanessa called me immediately, not to congratulate but to warn me. "How are you planning to have a wedding? Behind the bar? Or in the back lot of a taco truck? Stop belittling people just because they don't live like you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't get it, Kat. You're setting yourself up for a mediocre life, a man with no career, no connections, nothing but bottles. Have you even thought about your future?" "I have," I answered. "And that future doesn't include your toxicity." I hung up right after, heart pounding in my chest. Brandon held me close as I told him what happened, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. No matter how strong he tried to be, I knew her words had left a mark. Vanessa didn't just disapprove. She started reaching out to relatives, mutual friends, even my former colleagues, telling them all about Catherine, the academic prodigy, about to marry a bartender. She told my aunt I was having a midlife crisis, and my uncle that I was being used. I thought it would stop there, but I was wrong, very wrong. If there's one thing that fills me with both fear and excitement, it's Brandon's biggest secret. The one we've kept hidden for almost 2 years. Every time I saw Vanessa mock him, scoff at his job, his clothes, or even his non-designer shoes, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Because if she knew Brandon was the only son of Philip Lancaster, founder of Lancaster & Co., a restaurant empire stretching across the U.S., with assets worth over $850 million, Vanessa would probably collapse in her Valentino dress, sobbing that she spat on the very dream she's chased her entire life. Here is the direct American English translation of your passage with no additions. Brandon and I had agreed from the start to keep his identity a secret until after the wedding. Not to play some kind of gotcha game, but because we both wanted to know who truly stood by us when status and money weren't part of the equation. And by now, it was clear Vanessa had removed herself from that list with her own venomous mouth. Brandon started working at a small bar in Charleston after leaving New York. He didn't use the Lancaster name, just Brandon Hale. No one knew about the powerful family behind him, and he had no intention of telling. Every morning he arrived at the bar at 10 a.m., wiped down the counters, checked inventory, and studied mixology. In the evenings he studied business online, preparing for the day he'd officially take over the family company. I remember one time, we were lying on the wooden floor, backs against the old sofa in our tiny studio apartment, when he told me, "I don't want to walk into a top-floor office without ever having cleaned the kitchen floor. My dad used to say, to lead an empire you have to understand every single brick of it first. And I agree, even if most of my family thinks I'm crazy." I nodded, holding his hand. "I love that about you. And if my sister ever finds out the truth, I swear she'll lose it before the rest of the family even does." Brandon laughed. "Let her keep thinking I'm just a bartender. I like this role, less pressure, more freedom. And it's the best way to see people's true colors when they judge others by income." There was one time Vanessa came to the bar, not to show support, but to verify what I'd told her. She sat down at the counter, ordered a sugar-free martini, and frowned when she saw Brandon behind the bar. "Well, bartender. My sister says you're good at mixing drinks. I'm expecting something not ordinary." Brendan just smiled. He didn't need to say much. He made her a stunning martini, perfectly balanced, with a sliver of orange peel cut as sharp as a blade. Vanessa took a sip, then looked up. For the first time, with nothing to criticize. "Not bad," she said coldly, then pulled a black Visa card from her wallet. Brandon didn't take it. "We only accept cash or member cards here," he said, then turned away. Vanessa froze for a few seconds, lips pressed tight, eyes practically sparking. I stood in the corner, biting my lip not to laugh. If she had known she'd just been rejected by a man who could buy the entire street just to shut it down, she might have exploded. After that, Vanessa called me twice, sent a long 3-paragraph message, mostly warning me to wake up. That Brandon was clearly scamming me. A bartender who knew how to converse politely, pick fine liquor, speak French, and tie a Windsor knot? According to her, there were only 2 options. He was a fraud, or I was a fool. I didn't argue. I let her believe whatever she wanted. The truth is, Brandon grew up in Manhattan high society, went to Le Rosey, the most prestigious boarding school in Switzerland, and then studied hospitality at Cornell, but he got tired of the glitz, the fake meetings, the fancy dinners where no one truly listened. He chose Charleston for a while. To relearn simple living, to immerse himself in real life. My parents once asked me gently, very American in that roundabout polite way, "Do you think Brandon can take care of you long term?" I smiled. "If by take care you mean financially, maybe." "You should ask Philip Lancaster if he trusts his successor." They didn't get the joke. That was fine. We planned a small wedding, a historic chapel under the oaks, close friends, a simple but elegant menu. Brandon suggested the reception be held at a restaurant of his choosing. I didn't ask. I trusted him. But Vanessa was another story. "Don't tell me you're having the wedding reception at the bar he works at?" "No, not that. It's another restaurant. I'll only say this once. If your wedding doesn't have Norwegian salmon, Dom Perignon, and a violinist, don't expect me to come." I gave a cold smile. "Then maybe you should start saving gas now." I didn't tell her that the reception would be held at Lancaster Reserve, the flagship restaurant of the company, a place where regular people need to book at least 11 months in advance and only attend by private invitation. Brandon still works as a bartender by day, but at night, when he's sitting with me reviewing interior designs for the new Lancaster branch in Chicago, I remember the look in Vanessa's eyes at the bar. The look of a predator who had just been taken down by prey she thought was weak. And I swear, the day the truth comes out will be the day Vanessa realizes her condescension only made her look smaller than anyone else in this story. If someone asked me what the most unforgettable moment of my wedding day was, I wouldn't say it was the long-sleeved lace gown I had custom-made in Florence. Nor was it the pristine white peony bouquet, or the vintage Bentley that brought me to the chapel. It was Vanessa's voice ringing out through the sanctuary, shrill as fingernails on a chalkboard, shattering the most sacred moment of my life. I remember that moment clearly. The piano music faded, and the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Magnolia Chapel, casting a painting-like glow over Brandon, the man I love, standing at the end of the aisle, waiting for me. He smiled, his gaze gentle, like an embrace without touch. Everything was perfect. Until... Stop! Vanessa's voice rang out like a siren in a silent forest. The entire chapel froze. Some guests turned their heads. I turned around, and my heart felt like it was about to leap out of my chest. Vanessa had shot up from her seat in a blazing red dress, heels nearly 4 inches tall, pounding against the wooden floor as she marched down the aisle. "I can't stay quiet any longer, Catherine. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. You can't marry him." Him, she meant Brandon, my soon-to-be husband. The man standing motionless at the end of the aisle, strangely composed, though his hand gripped the bouquet I was holding a little tighter. My father, sitting in the front row, glared at Vanessa. "Vanessa, sit down right now." "No," she shouted. I won't sit by and watch my sister ruin her future for some bartender. I was stunned. Guests began whispering. Some gave awkward laughs. Others looked at me with pity, and some avoided eye contact, as if my embarrassment were contagious. Vanessa turned to Brandon, pointing at him like she was delivering a verdict. "You're deceiving her. Don't think I don't see you trying to climb the ladder. Marrying an Ivy League graduate, it's obvious. You're using her to level up, and Catherine? You're too naive to realize it." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath behind me. She started to rise, but my father gently held her back. Brandon remained still, his chin lifted, his eyes showing not fear, but something close to pity. "For Vanessa." I stepped forward, facing my sister. "Can you stop? This is my wedding." "Exactly. And I won't let you ruin your life for a guy who pours drinks for tips. You deserve better. It can make me happier than anyone who's ever loved me. Even that investment banker you married for his bank account." The whole room gasped. Vanessa's eyes burned. "You dare compare Michael to that guy? Michael owns 3 properties, has bank shares, and knows senators. Brandon has nothing but hardworking hands and a kind heart," I said. "And if you can't respect me enough to sit quietly for one ceremony, then you're welcome to leave. Right now." Vanessa sneered, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this. When you're living in a cheap apartment, splitting bills with a man who has no future. Don't come running to me when it all falls apart." She turned on her heel, the sound of her shoes echoing like one final insult. The chapel doors slammed shut. No one followed. No one defended her. A long silence fell. I stood in the aisle, my heart heavy as stone. Then, the officiant's voice rang out, warm and calm. "Shall we continue?" Brandon stepped forward and took my hand. "If you still want to," he whispered. "I'll be right here waiting, even if the whole world turns away." I looked into his eyes. There wasn't a trace of doubt. I nodded. "Let's continue." The wedding went on, no longer perfect, but absolutely real. Like our love, not dressed up, not glittery on the surface, just built on honesty. As we exchanged rings, I glanced back at the empty seat. Vanessa's. A part of me felt sad, but another part felt relief. I knew what was coming would silence her for the rest of her life. Because Vanessa had no idea. She had just caused a scene at a wedding that belonged to America's hidden elite, and she had smeared her own name in front of the very world she desperately wanted to belong to. But that truth is for later. Today, I only needed one thing: to become the wife of the man I trust more than anyone else in the world. There's a moment I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Not when I said "I do," but when Vanessa stood frozen in the middle of the reception hall, mouth agape, her champagne glass slipping from her hand and shattering against the imported Italian marble floor. That sight, I swear, was more satisfying than the honeymoon waiting ahead. After the drama-filled ceremony, Brandon and I left the chapel in a silver Aston Martin vintage car. Part of his family's personal collection, though I'm sure Vanessa still thought it was a rental. The evening sun cast golden-orange streaks across the water. And I remember Brandon holding my hand tightly the entire short ride to the reception venue. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low and laced with humor. I turned to him, smiling with unhidden glee. I've waited my whole life for this moment. We arrived at the Lancaster Reserve, the flagship restaurant of the Lancaster Group, a place that almost never hosts weddings unless you're family. The frosted glass doors opened, revealing gleaming oak interiors, radiant Austrian crystal chandeliers, and a team of staff in white uniforms and gloves standing at attention. Soft violin music floated from a corner of the lobby, and hushed murmurs of disbelief began to spread. What's going on? Did they really book this place? No way. I waited 3 months for a reservation, and couldn't even get in. We walked in, eyes wide all around us. Brandon greeted each guest with a slight bow, not like a groom but like a host. I heard whispers behind us. Something's off. How could a bartender book this place? And then, she arrived. Vanessa walked in, eyes full of smugness, her usual runway-like strut on full display, red dress, Chanel purse, clicking heels. She scanned the room, ready to strike. But her gaze froze when she saw the embossed Lancaster emblem on the wall behind the bar. Then came the panic in her eyes when she saw the server bow respectfully to Brandon and call him Mr. Lancaster. She cut through the crowd, storming toward me with a face twisted in anger and confusion. "I thought you said this would be a simple reception." "For me, simple means only inviting people I care about, and this place," I smiled, "is our family restaurant." "What?" Vanessa squinted, disbelieving. "Are you saying you booked the Lancaster Reserve?" Brandon stepped forward, placing his hand on my back. "No, Vanessa, my family owns it." A hush fell over the room. And then, a warm, commanding voice rose from behind us. "My grandson marrying such a wonderful woman, truly a blessing for the Lancaster family." Philip Lancaster, the man who leads one of the largest culinary empires in America, walked in with an air of authority and a kind smile. He embraced Brandon, then turned to me and offered a gentle handshake. "Welcome, daughter-in-law, our family is honored to have you." Vanessa looked like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She staggered back a step, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers, shattering into dozens of pieces that rang out like the funeral bells of her delusions. You're Philip Lancaster's grandson?" she stammered, lips dry. Brandon nodded calmly. "Yes, and the same man you once called a gold digger trying to marry up." All eyes in the hall turned to Vanessa. Guests who had heard her insults, who had been forced to take the side of the perfect older sister, now couldn't hide their shock and satisfaction. Philip looked at Vanessa, eyes sharp as ice. "You're Catherine's sister? I heard you had some strong opinions during the ceremony." Vanessa stood stiff as a statue, trying to back away. I didn't know." "Exactly why we didn't tell anyone," I cut in. "Because we wanted to see who actually cared about love, not about asset lists." I turned to Brandon, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "And thanks to you, we got our answer, loud and clear." No one accused Vanessa. No one needed to. The silence and the looks from over 100 people in that room were the verdict. I saw her about to turn and leave, but Brandon stopped her with a sentence that was gentle, yet sharp as a knife. "Stay, Vanessa, enjoy the party, and if you can, try learning to see people with your heart instead of your credit card." She froze for a few seconds, then nodded, reluctantly, but with no other choice. The entire reception was a flawless display. A menu featuring lobster, Kobe beef, beluga caviar, wine from the Lancasters' private vineyard, a small symphony orchestra performing classical pieces live. Every detail was meticulously arranged, and every minute, I saw Vanessa sitting silent like a wax figure, her eyes lost in the dazzling crowd she had always dreamed of joining. When Brandon led me to the dance floor, I looked back at my sister. She sat alone at the end of the long table, the light reflecting off a wineglass she couldn't even bring herself to drink from. That expression, it wasn't pride anymore. It was collapse. I used to think the height of revenge was seeing the person who hurt you exposed under a spotlight, but I was wrong. The true pinnacle is when that person has to sit in a room full of people they once looked down on, and no one bothers to hide their contempt. Vanessa sat motionless, as if her soul had left her body. Her face pale, her dull eyes fixed on the shards of the crystal glass beneath her feet, the broken pieces of the illusion she had built around her life. But if she thought it was all over, that was just the opening act. Brandon's grandfather, Mr. Philip Lancaster, after greeting me with a gentle hug, turned toward Vanessa with a gaze that seemed to scan a stranger who had just disrupted a sacred event. "So, you're the one who stood up in the middle of my grandson's wedding and shouted at the bride that a bartender wasn't worthy?" Vanessa flinched, her face scrunched. I didn't know he was. I thought." "You thought, and that gave you the right to insult others?" Philip cut in, his tone calm but every word sharp. Even if my grandson truly were a bartender, it's still an honest profession. Only arrogant ignorance turns someone into a disgrace. The entire hall went dead silent. Some guests sipped their drinks, others turned away, no one willing to look directly at the shame unfolding. Vanessa tried to smile, but her lips trembled like she was about to cry. I was just trying to protect my sister. I was afraid she was being used. And you protected her by humiliating her on her wedding day, ruining the ceremony in front of family and friends? Philip didn't break his gaze. Sadly, what you call protection is just veiled degradation. Vanessa bowed her head. For the first time in my life, I saw my sister speechless. No more excuses, no more biting comebacks, just raw confusion, laid bare for all to see. I was about to say something to diffuse the moment. A part of me, though hurt, still felt a pang seeing my sister humiliated like that. But Brandon stepped forward first, calm as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. He bent down to her eye level, his voice soft like wind brushing across water. Vanessa, you once asked why we didn't tell you the truth. Now you have your answer. Vanessa looked up, her eyes blurry with tears, but she tried to maintain a shred of dignity. I was wrong. Brandon nodded. Yes, but being wrong isn't unforgivable. The question is whether you want to make it right. He stood up, looking around, and spoke louder, so everyone could hear. Even though what she did was unacceptable, today is a celebration, and I want Catherine to remember this day as something beautiful, not something scarred. So I'm inviting you to stay, as an honored guest, not because you deserve it, but because I believe anyone can change if they truly want to. The room held its breath. I looked at Brandon, and my heart felt like it could burst from emotion. Even in the moment when my sister had hurt me most, he was more gracious than anyone I'd ever known. Vanessa hesitated. She glanced around. The faces that used to be her social allies now looked at her with cold detachment. The people she once smiled at, bragging about her husband and her car, now just wanted to stay far away, like she was a social storm to avoid. She choked. I want to stay. And I'm sorry. To both of you. Before I could answer, Philip raised an eyebrow, his tone still firm. You will stay, but today you are not the main character. Don't take another moment away from this couple. Vanessa nodded like a student being disciplined. She walked back to her seat and sat down, both hands on her lap, as if she didn't dare breathe too hard. The party continued. Music played again, glasses were refilled, appetizers were served. But from where I sat, I saw it clearly. Vanessa didn't touch a single dish, just sat there, eyes fixed on her glass of water. A few people approached to speak with her, probably out of politeness. She tried to smile, but the forced grin and puffy eyes couldn't hide how completely out of place she was from the joyful atmosphere around her. A few hours later, as I was dancing with Brandon in the center of the floor, I saw Vanessa standing by a wall, watching. No judgment in her eyes, no smugness in her posture, just exhausted emptiness. For the first time in my life, my sister looked small. Brandon leaned down and whispered, "Do you think she'll change?" I looked at my sister, the same person who used to make me feel like a failure just because I didn't live the way she thought I should. Now standing alone, quietly, with no one expecting her to smile, and no one waiting for her to shine. "I don't know," I replied. "But if there's ever a moment to begin, it's right here. At the place where she once held her head highest, and now has to bow it the lowest." 1 year after the wedding, Brandon and I were living a life I once thought only existed in movies. Peaceful, private, unpretentious, but full and happy. We had moved into a new penthouse overlooking Charleston Bay, where the morning light stretched across the white silk curtains and the sound of the waves whispered like soft declarations of love. I continued teaching, while Brandon became more involved in the Lancaster Group's management. Everything felt programmed for a stable life, until one stormy night, Vanessa showed up at our door, soaked like a stray cat, her face looking like it had been dragged through 4 circles of hell. I still remember the feeling when I opened the door and saw my sister standing there. Dress wrinkled, makeup smeared, mascara streaking like black blood down her cheeks. Her high heels looked like they'd waded through garbage, and her once golden hair was plastered in wet clumps under the rain. In her hands, no designer bag, no phone, not even a coat. They took everything, Kat. Vanessa's voice was hoarse, nearly unrecognizable from the one that once told me I was socially downgrading for loving a bartender. I said nothing, I simply stepped aside to let her in. Brandon, sitting on the sofa reading financial reports, stood up immediately when he saw her. Vanessa looked at him, then collapsed like a sandcastle hit by a wave. I need help, I don't know who else to turn to. I made hot tea in the kitchen, my heart both cold and conflicted. Not because she came, but because I knew. If Vanessa had set aside her pride to come to me, the same person she had once humiliated without mercy, then her world must have truly fallen apart. When I returned, Vanessa was seated, both hands wrapped tightly around the tea mug like it was the last bit of warmth she could hold on to. Michael's been arrested, she stammered. The SEC launched an investigation, froze all our accounts, seized the house, they took the cars, the bags, everything. I have nothing left. I swallowed hard. What happened? Insider trading, stock fraud, and money laundering. I didn't know. I really didn't. Brandon sat beside me, his face was calm, but I noticed the guarded look in his eyes. Vanessa, you don't have to go into detail if you're not ready, but why did you come here? I have nowhere else to go, she said, eyes brimming. Michael's family cut me off, my friends turned their backs. No one believes I wasn't involved. They think I'm guilty too. I have no home, no money, no one. A silence fell like a mourning veil. Then she turned to me, eyes red but flickering with a fragile hope. Kat, can you help me? I clenched my hands in my lap, my heart twisting. Part of me wanted to laugh. This was the same person who once said if I ended up living in a rental, I shouldn't come crying to her when my dream fell apart. And now? Who was standing on the edge of collapse? Brandon looked at me, waiting for my decision. But then he spoke first. There's a small apartment above our restaurant in downtown Charleston, not far, clean, fully equipped. If you need a temporary place, we can arrange that. Vanessa looked up, stunned. Really? After everything I did? I nodded slightly. There's one condition. She went quiet, waiting. You'll work at that restaurant, from the bottom up, just like Brandon did. Vanessa frowned. You mean, as a server? Brandon stepped in, his voice not mocking but firm. Serving, dishwashing, cleaning, learning to cook, whatever task is assigned. No special treatment. No Louboutins, no acrylic nails, just real work. A brief silence. She hesitated. I'll do it. If that's the only way. I looked directly at my sister. This isn't charity, Vanessa. This is a chance to start over. But if you're not serious, this door will close. And next time, no one will open it for you. Vanessa bowed her head. I understand, and thank you both of you. I truly regret everything. Brandon stood up and nodded. Starting tomorrow, morning shift, 6 a.m. Vanessa looked up, her face exhausted but showing something else. Something I hadn't seen in her in over 30 years. Humility. I will never forget the first morning Vanessa started her new job as a server at the Hearth, a small but busy restaurant in downtown Charleston, part of the Lancaster family chain. From the second-floor window where I sat sipping coffee, I saw my sister, the same woman who used to show up to alumni events with a Hermes bag, fumbling in a plain uniform, hair tied back, face pale without makeup, hands trembling as she held a tray of water. The first shift, just as Brandon had instructed. 6 a.m. shift change, the kitchen still ice cold, and the head chef, a Cuban woman named Leticia, known for being notoriously strict, not afraid to throw a pan if someone messed up a recipe. Vanessa, who once snapped her fingers to order food at Atlanta's finest restaurants, now had to learn how to sanitize tables, separate compost waste, and peel potatoes without losing a fingernail. I didn't come close, I only watched. Because this wasn't about satisfaction. This was a test. An opportunity not meant to soothe my bruised pride, but to force her to face her raw self. Without makeup, or business cards to hide behind. Vanessa spilled coffee during her first shift, washed dishes until her hands turned red. Got scolded harshly by the chef for mixing up sauces, and worst of all, she had to clean the public restroom at the end of the day. Something I'm certain she never would have entered before without a cloud of luxury perfume already sprayed in the air. That night, Vanessa stumbled back to the small apartment above the restaurant. No central air, no bougainvillea-covered balcony, no walk-in closet full of designer clothes. Just an old wooden bed, a mini fridge, and a faded landscape painting someone left behind years ago. I brought her some food. Vanessa opened the door, wearing a simple t-shirt, hair messy, dark circles under her eyes. "You didn't have to do this," she mumbled. "You don't owe me anything." I placed the food on the table. "I know. But today, you didn't run. And that's worth something." Vanessa sat down, holding the fork like she was holding out an olive branch from the heavens. "Kat. I'm sorry. For everything. You were right. You were always right. I've judged everything with the wrong measure." I looked at her. The woman who once taught me how to sit properly around rich people. Who corrected my posture at dinner. Who mocked me for choosing a low-paying career in teaching. "No one is born knowing everything," I replied. "But not everyone is willing to learn again from the beginning." Brandon dropped by the next night. He handed Vanessa a packet, an internal training schedule for new restaurant employees. No privileges included. "You'll have to learn every position," he said without sugarcoating. "Dishwashing, serving, food running, kitchen support. After that, if you don't get fired, you can try the bar." "You'd fire me if I don't meet the standard?" Vanessa asked, half joking, half afraid. "Not me. The shift managers. They don't care who you are, only what you can do." I saw a strange kind of confusion flash in my sister's eyes. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to fight for your place, not with a name, but with actual ability. In the third week, Vanessa burned her hand trying to carry a plate fresh out of the oven. She screamed in the middle of the kitchen, tears threatening to fall. Chef Letitia just glanced over. "You'll live. Next time use oven mitts." No pity. No one rushed to comfort her. And Vanessa? I thought she would throw the tray down and walk out. But instead, she turned back, tightened the gloves, and finished the task. I was behind the bar at that moment, checking inventory. My throat tightened. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely proud of my sister. 2 months later, Vanessa could handle a 10-person party table without dropping a single spoon. She started memorizing the menu without writing anything down, even helped a new staff member improve how they describe dishes to guests. She cleaned tables like she was piecing her life back together. Each napkin, each glass, each humble glance. And what surprised me most? She started leaving tips when eating out elsewhere. Just a few dollars, but I knew it was her way of saying sorry, not with words, but with action. One late afternoon, as the sun painted the restaurant windows red, Brandon walked into the kitchen and asked my sister, "What would you think about trying a shift lead role next week?" Vanessa nearly dropped a water bottle. "What? You've made the rounds, learned everything from the ground up." "The staff trusts you. Our current manager's being relocated to the Savannah branch. If you're open to it, the position is yours." I walked in right then, seeing my sister frozen, lips pressed tight. Then, slowly, without theatrics or tears, she nodded. "I don't know how to thank you enough, but I won't let either of you down." 3 months. That's how long Vanessa had to go through nearly every job she once considered beneath her. I used to think nothing could make my sister bow her head. But now, every time I walked into the Hearth, the once small restaurant in the Lancaster chain that had become a whole new world for Vanessa, I barely recognized the woman who used to think the universe revolved around her. Vanessa no longer stood stiffly at the bar giving orders. She wiped tables, ran food, checked tickets and helped anyone in need, even the brand new dishwasher on their first day. I still remember the first time I saw my sister truly smile when a customer complimented a meal. Not because someone gave her a designer gift or bragged about their child's scholarship. The way she bowed slightly in gratitude, eyes bright without pretense, I realized, for the first time in years, Vanessa wasn't performing. Letitia, who once made Vanessa cry on her first day, had become a close friend. The two of them shared evening shifts, stayed up late doing inventory and planning the weekly menu. Once, Letitia told me, "Vanessa, she wasn't the kind of person I thought would last here, but she proved me wrong. And I'm glad she did." It wasn't just the staff who grew fond of Vanessa, so did the customers. My sister started remembering each regular's name, who was allergic to mushrooms, who liked their steak medium rare, who only drank peppermint tea from a specific brand. The way she cared for every tiny detail left me both amazed and moved. One Friday night, Brandon and I came in late for dinner after work. The restaurant was nearly full, lively but calm. Vanessa passed by our table, smiled, like always, and returned to the counter with a confident, steady stride. I saw a glow around her. Not the kind from power or money, but from someone standing tall on her own feet. Brandon leaned in and whispered, "Remember when she used to call this a cheap job?" I smiled softly, eyes on Vanessa, showing a new employee how to enter orders on the tablet. Now it's what she's most proud of. Not long after, Vanessa was officially nominated by Letitia to become the restaurant manager. Not because she was related to the owner, but because, as Letitia put it, "She's shed more sweat and tears than anyone here, and never once asked for special treatment." The night she got the offer, Vanessa invited me up to the small apartment above the restaurant, where she had lived for the past 3 months. It no longer looked temporary. She had repainted the walls herself, hung family photos, added a few plants, and set up a cozy corner with cookbooks and a thick work journal. "What do you think?" she asked, pouring me a cup of hot ginger tea. "I know it's not the mansion from before. I think it feels like a real home." For the first time, she sat down across from me, her hands clasped together. "I used to think I had it all, that I was successful, but the truth is, I didn't understand real value. I lived off reputation, relied on other people's money, and when I lost everything, I was no one. But now?" She paused, her eyes brimming with tears. "Now I look in the mirror and see a woman, not perfect, but standing on her own, not because of anyone else, not for praise, just because I want to be someone I can be proud of." I didn't say anything. I just stood up and walked over to hug my sister. For the first time in years, that hug carried no barriers, no rivalry, no wounded past. All that was left was family. Simple. Whole. The following week, Vanessa officially took on the role of manager at the Hearth. She stood before the entire staff, most of whom had witnessed her awkward mistakes, her tears, her early failures, to thank them and promise to keep striving. No flowers, no champagne, no congratulatory banners. But there was genuine applause. And I knew that for Vanessa, it was a moment more glorious than any celebration she'd ever had. My sister, the woman who once believed a person's worth lay in where they dined, the car they drove, and the digits in their bank account, had now found pride in making sure every guest left the restaurant satisfied. She told me about inventory control, staffing for peak seasons, and how customers reacted when they switched from frozen to fresh strawberries in the dessert. Her eyes lit up. Not because of money, but because she was being recognized for her effort. One day, I asked, "If someone asked you what you do, what would you say?" Vanessa thought for a moment, then smiled. I'm a server, a restaurant manager, and I'm proud of that. The story of me and Vanessa is proof that people can change when they truly face the truth and take responsibility for themselves. From someone who once looked down on manual labor and lived for status and wealth, my sister learned to bow her head, start over, and find real value in effort and kindness. Life isn't measured by status or possessions, but by how we treat others. And the courage to walk through our mistakes to become a better version of ourselves. What do you think about Vanessa's journey? Does everyone deserve a second chance? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more powerful and inspiring real-life stories. I never thought I'd become a single mom. But as I sat in my small apartment, the glow of my laptop casting light on a pile of overdue bills, I realized my life had never gone according to plan. While my younger sister, Olivia, was busy picking wedding flowers and trying on dazzling white dresses, I was here, crunching numbers to make sure I had enough money to pay for my son's tuition. Ironically, my mother, Margaret, proudly bragged about Olivia's lavish wedding but looked down on me like I was some kind of failure. Hannah, you're always busy with those stupid numbers. Life isn't just about work, you know that, right? My mom's voice crackled through the phone, bitter and judgmental. I glanced at the clock on my laptop. It was nearly 6 p.m. I had 30 minutes before I had to pick up Ben, my 8-year-old son, from school. I have to work, Mom. Not everyone has a rich man taking care of everything like Olivia does. I heard her sigh in frustration. There you go again. You're always jealous of your sister. She has love because she deserves it. You? If you keep living like this, no one will ever want you. I clenched my jaw. No one would ever want me? I had been in love. I had trusted someone. And then, I was left with a child in my arms, while the man I loved vanished, chasing a life that didn't include me. But I didn't have time to cry or dwell on it. I had a child to raise, a job to keep, and a life to build on my own. So you called just to remind me how useless I am? I asked, my tone calm but laced with bitterness. No. I called to talk about dinner tomorrow. Olivia wants the whole family there. She's introducing her fiancé. You have to come. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, another evening for you and Olivia to show off how perfect she is and highlight what a failure I am. Sounds delightful. Think whatever you want. But you need to be there. And make sure Ben doesn't cause trouble. You know how Olivia hates noise. Ben is a good kid. If anyone causes trouble, it's not him. My mom didn't even bother to respond, just the cold sound of the call ending. I set my phone down on the table and took a deep breath to stay calm. I was used to being pushed aside, to the criticism from my mother and Olivia's indifference. But for Ben, I couldn't fall apart. I had to keep moving forward, no matter how rough the road got. The dinner my mom mentioned came sooner than I expected. I stood in front of the grand gate of the luxurious mansion that my mom and Olivia always loved to brag about. The large windows glowed warmly, but I knew that inside wasn't a place meant for me. Beside me, Ben squeezed my hand gently. Mom, do we really have to go in? His voice was small but filled with worry. I knelt down and brushed his brown hair. Just for a little while, sweetheart. If you're uncomfortable, we'll leave early. The door opened before I could even knock. My mom stood there in an elegant dress, a polite smile on her lips but ice in her eyes. Hannah, you finally made it. Come in, but remember, don't embarrass Olivia. I gave a half smile. Same old words. Walking into the spacious living room, I could already hear Olivia's bright laughter. She was lounging comfortably on a chair, a striking red dress hugging her perfect figure, a wineglass in hand. She looked every bit the center of attention. Hannah, you're here, Olivia exclaimed, but the way she looked at me was like she was sizing up an outdated outfit. And this must be Ben, right? Oh my gosh, he's grown so fast. Hi, Aunt Olivia, Ben said softly, stepping closer to me. Olivia didn't respond to him. She had already turned away, chatting with other guests. I bit my lip to hold back the wave of anger rising in my chest. To her, Ben was just another unwanted detail in the perfect painting she was trying to create of her life. "Oh, Hannah, come here for a sec." Olivia waved me over, her eyes sparkling with pride. "I want to introduce you to my fiancé, Jackson Carter." I turned and for a moment, time stopped. Jackson stood there, tall, with dark hair and deep eyes. He had the look of a man who had seen life, polished but not distant. When our eyes met, I felt a strange sense of familiarity. "Nice to meet you, Hannah." His voice was warm and smooth. I shook his hand, and as soon as our hands touched, a faint memory stirred in my mind, but I couldn't quite place it. "Nice to meet you too," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Jackson looked down at Ben and smiled. "And this must be your son?" Ben nodded, a little shy. "Yes, I'm Ben. How old are you?" 8. "Awesome. When I was 8, I spent the whole summer building a wooden fort. Do you like building things?" Ben hesitated, then his eyes lit up. "I like assembling models. I just finished a Lego spaceship last week." Jackson laughed. "Really? Then you'll have to show it to me someday." Throughout the conversation, I noticed Olivia standing nearby, arms crossed, her lips pressed tightly in irritation. "Jackson, sweetheart, can you pour me another glass of wine?" Olivia interrupted, cutting off his conversation with Ben. Jackson nodded. But before walking away, he glanced at me once more, a thoughtful look in his eyes. The evening went on, with long conversations about the wedding, the extravagant plans Olivia proudly flaunted. I stayed quiet the whole time, focusing only on Ben and the meal in front of me. But inside, the questions kept spinning. Why did Jackson look so familiar? And why did his eyes seem to be trying to tell me something he couldn't say out loud? Something was coming, I could feel it. I never thought I'd have any role in Olivia's wedding, but when I received the message from my mom, a small pang still hit me. "You're not on the bridesmaids list, hope you understand. You're busy with Ben and work, right?" Reading Olivia's message, I gave a dry smile. Of course I wasn't surprised. She didn't want a sister who looked so plain standing among her glamorous bridesmaids. I didn't fit into her glittering world. The world where everything had to be dazzling, perfect, and with no place for single moms like me. I put the phone down and turned back to the stack of papers on my desk. No matter how grand Olivia's wedding would be, it couldn't matter more than making sure everything was right for Ben. But then, when my mother called again the next morning, I knew I wouldn't completely escape this. "Hannah, can you help me with something?" Margaret's voice was unnaturally sweet, like she was about to ask for something I couldn't say no to. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "What is it?" "The wedding needs someone to handle the guest list paperwork. Olivia's too busy with dress fittings and photo shoots. I thought you could help." "Help? Weren't they the ones who pushed me aside?" But instead of pushing back, I bit my lip and stayed calm. If I refused, Mom would just say I was being petty, that I always make myself the victim. "I'll do it," I replied flatly. I spent the next week managing the guest list, checking the venue, and following up with the event company, things Olivia should have been doing, but she was too busy showing off her wedding of the century on Instagram. When I arrived at my mother's mansion one afternoon to go over the seating chart, Jackson was standing at the kitchen counter, holding a cup of coffee, his eyes watching me. "Hannah, helping Olivia again?" he asked, his voice low, with a hint of something probing. I shrugged, flipping through the guest list. "Seems like it. Even though I'm not considered part of the wedding, apparently I'm still useful when needed." Jackson set his cup down and leaned on the counter, his eyes thoughtful. "Olivia shouldn't treat you that way." I gave a sarcastic smile. "You're just realizing that now?" Jackson didn't respond right away. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to find something in my eyes. "From the first time I met you, I felt like I knew you." His voice dropped. I froze, my heart suddenly racing. "What do you mean?" He looked like he was about to say something else, but at that moment, Olivia walked in, trailing a strong cloud of perfume. "Jackson, darling, I need your help picking the flower arrangements." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp as she looked at me. Jackson hesitated for a second before nodding and following Olivia out. I watched them go, a strange feeling rising in my chest. The following days, I kept working behind the scenes of the extravagant wedding. No one asked for my input on the menu, the speeches, or anything important. But every time Jackson appeared, he gave me those strange looks, like he was trying to remember something. Then one evening, while I was sitting in my mother's living room editing the guest list, Jackson suddenly walked in. "Do you remember me?" he asked, his voice serious. I looked up, frowning. "Have we met before?" Jackson let out a quiet laugh, but it wasn't a joyful one. 10 years ago, at St. Mary's Hospital. I froze. That name hit me like a cold wind rushing through my memories. St. Mary's. The hospital where I once volunteered as a young woman. Where I had spent months caring for patients fighting for their lives. And then, the image of a young girl with light blonde hair, a pale face that always carried a smile, appeared in my mind. "Your sister," I whispered, a chill running down my spine. Jackson nodded, his eyes lighting up like he had just found a missing piece of a puzzle. "I've been looking for you all these years, Hannah." I looked at Jackson, my heart pounding as the faded memories began to take shape. St. Mary's Hospital. That name wasn't distant at all. I had spent months there as a volunteer, caring for patients I knew might not make it. And then, there was that girl with the gentle smile, the light blonde hair, and the hopeful blue eyes. "Your sister was Claire," I whispered, barely believing my own memory. Jackson nodded, his gaze sharp but filled with pain. "You remember now?" I swallowed hard, a heavy feeling tightening in my chest. I took care of her. I didn't know you were Claire's brother." Jackson quietly pulled out a chair and sat across from me. He looked at me, as if trying to confirm that the woman in front of him was the one he had been searching for all these years. "I didn't recognize you right away," he said, his voice low, "but when I saw you, something kept tugging at me, like a piece of something important I had forgotten. Today, I finally remembered." I stayed silent as the pieces slowly fell into place in my mind. Claire had been such a strong girl, even as cancer drained her strength, she kept smiling. I remembered the late nights sitting by her bedside, reading her favorite books, sharing stories about life. And I remembered a young man who visited her every weekend, a boy with deep, worried eyes, and a tense face whenever the doctors delivered more bad news. It was Jackson. I clenched my hands, my voice hoarse. "You used to come to the hospital every Saturday. You always brought sunflowers." Jackson gave a faint smile, though his eyes held a deep sadness. "Yeah. Sunflowers were her favorite." Suddenly, another image flashed in my mind. A little boy holding a messy drawing, running into Claire's hospital room. Back then my son was only 5. I used to bring him to the hospital with me when I worked weekend shifts. Ben, with his innocent heart, had made so many drawings for the patients. Claire included. I still remembered the way Claire's eyes sparkled with joy when she received one of his pictures. A bright sun next to a smiling girl with blonde hair. Jackson blinked, as if the memory returned to him too. "I still have that drawing." I looked at him, stunned. "When Claire passed, I put it in a memory box. Today, when I remembered who you were, I went home and opened it." Jackson's voice tightened. "And you know what? Among Claire's things, there's still a letter she wrote to you, but never got the chance to send." I felt everything around me blur. "A letter? Claire wanted to say something to me before she passed?" Jackson pulled a small time-worn envelope from his pocket. I stared at it, my hands trembling as I reached for it. "Hannah," Jackson said, his voice low and full of emotion. "We have a past you don't know about. I've been looking for you for years, but I never imagined fate would bring us back together. Like this." I opened the envelope, my eyes scanning Claire's messy, yet heartfelt handwriting. "Hannah, if you're reading this letter, I'm probably no longer here. But I want you to know, in the final days of my life, you gave me something no doctor ever could. Warmth and hope. You were the light in my darkest days. Thank you. And if someday you meet my little brother again, tell him I always loved him, and I hope he finds true happiness. I hadn't even realized when the tears began rolling down my cheeks. Jackson gently took my hand, his eyes full of emotion. I owe you more than I could ever say, he whispered. And now I know one thing for sure. I can't let you disappear from my life again. I looked up at Jackson, my heart tangled in 100 different emotions. I had just reconnected with someone I never knew I shared such a deep bond with. A door to the past had opened, dragging along memories and feelings I never thought I'd face again. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. I never looked forward to this day, but like it or not, Olivia's wedding happened, and I had to be there. Walking into the grand reception hall, I held Ben's hand tightly, reminding myself it was just one night. Just stay quiet, play my part, and I could leave. But the moment I stepped in, my mother's cold eyes scanned over me, sharp and judgmental. "Hannah, you finally made it," Margaret said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Just don't do anything that might embarrass Olivia." I gave a faint smile. "No worries, Mom, I'm not the center of attention tonight." The party buzzed with laughter and chatter. Olivia dazzled in her intricate wedding gown, clinging to Jackson like she owned the world. Everyone cheered and admired them, but I sat quietly in the corner, next to Ben. I could handle being ignored. I was used to it. But then came the truly horrifying moment. Olivia stood up, microphone in hand, her face glowing with a forced radiance. "Before we continue with the reception," she said, smiling that perfect smile, her eyes like knives when they turned to me, "I'd like to say a few words about my family. This is my sister Hannah. A strong, independent woman." She paused, then chuckled. "And a very proud single mother." Soft laughter rippled from some of the guests. I could feel Ben's eyes locked on me, his little face filled with fear. Olivia went on, her voice sugary, but every word a sharp blade. "She's always so busy with work, with life, still hasn't found anyone who can actually put up with her long term. But hey, that's okay, right? There's always room in the world for the slightly used." The hall went silent. A few nervous chuckles echoed, but most guests were stunned by Olivia's cruelty. I gripped Ben's hand tightly. But before I could react, my mother, Margaret, jumped in, as if to finish off what was left of my dignity. "She's right, Hannah's always been a little too serious," my mother said, shaking her head and raising her wineglass with a fake smile. "She may be a bit used, but still functional, as long as she's not too damaged." Laughter erupted from one corner of the room. I could feel Ben trembling beside me. I looked down, his eyes were glassy with tears. I couldn't let him stay in this room 1 second longer. I stood up and pulled Ben with me, but just as I turned to leave, a deep voice cut through the awful silence. "It's enough. Jackson." He placed his wineglass firmly on the table and stood up. The entire room fell still. Those words, "Do you think that was a joke?" Jackson's voice was calm, but laced with anger. "What gives you the right to humiliate Hannah like that?" Olivia's eyes widened, confusion and fury flashing across her face. "Jackson, what are you doing? This is our wedding day. And you think that gives you the right to mock your own sister in front of hundreds of people?" Jackson stared at Olivia, his voice sharp as a blade. My mother spoke up, her tone laced with irritation. "Jackson, you don't understand. Hannah is always—" "I understand perfectly," Jackson cut in, his eyes darkening. "I've been looking for her for years, never knowing she was my future sister-in-law. And today on my own wedding day, I watched her be humiliated by her own family, for no reason." The room grew so tense that no one dared to speak. Jackson looked directly at me, his eyes filled with determination. "Hannah," he said slowly, "come with me." I stared at him, unsure of what was happening. "We don't need to stay here," Jackson continued, his voice firm. "You don't deserve to be treated like this, and neither does Ben." I looked at Jackson, then around the room full of stunned faces. Olivia looked like she was about to explode, and my mother seemed unable to comprehend what was unfolding. I turned to Ben and saw him nod, his eyes full of hope. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand in Jackson's. "All right," I said. "Let's go." As we walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind a sea of whispers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. And I knew, from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't think Jackson would actually do it. I thought he was just standing up for me, and then he'd go back to Olivia pretending nothing had happened. But the moment we stepped outside the hall, I heard his voice ring out. Strong and clear, like thunder in the middle of a storm. "Wait!" I froze. Olivia turned sharply, eyes wide with confusion. Jackson stood in the center of the grand but hollow room, his expression serious. He was no longer the perfect groom Olivia had envisioned, but a man holding up the truth for everyone to see. "I can't go through with this wedding." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia's eyes widened, her voice cracking with desperation. "Jackson, what are you saying? This is our wedding day." Jackson shook his head, his eyes cold and detached. "No, Olivia, this isn't our day, this is a performance. You and your mother's attempt to publicly shame the one person you should be honoring, your sister." Olivia rushed toward him, gripping his arm as if trying to pull him back into the version of reality she still believed in. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone, you can't do this." Jackson looked down at her hand wrapped around his wrist, then calmly removed it. "I'm not humiliating you, Olivia, you did that all on your own." He turned to the stunned guests, their eyes bouncing between confusion and shock. "Do any of you even know who Hannah is, or more importantly, what she's done?" I held my breath. 10 years ago, when my sister Claire was in the final stage of cancer, it was Hannah who stayed by her side every day. When I was too broken and helpless to do anything, it was Hannah who gave Claire strength. She made my sister's last days full of hope. A gasp sounded from somewhere in the room. Some guests fell silent, clearly unaware of any of this. Jackson continued, his voice lower but steady. "And the woman I was about to marry, Olivia, along with her mother, could stand here on this day, at this wedding, and humiliate the very woman who brought light to my sister's darkest days. They didn't just insult Hannah, they insulted her innocent child as well." My mother, Margaret, immediately stood up, her voice icy. "Jackson, she's manipulating you. Don't let a minor past ruin your marriage." Jackson let out a dry laugh. "A minor past? A woman who gave her time, her heart, her energy for someone else? And this is how you repay her?" I felt my entire body tremble. I'd grown used to being dismissed by my family, but no one had ever spoken up for me like this before. Jackson turned back to Olivia, his face full of disappointment. "I used to think you had a warm heart," Jackson said, staring straight at Olivia, his voice as sharp as a knife. "That you were just influenced by your mother's standards. But today, I realize I was wrong. You're not just shallow. You're cruel." Olivia's face went pale, her lips trembling. "Jackson, you can't do this to me." He looked at her for a long moment, then silently removed the wedding ring from his finger. "My mind is made up, this marriage ends right here." The air in the room turned to ice. The whispers faded into a suffocating silence. Olivia screamed and lunged toward Jackson. "You can't leave me, what about my reputation?" Jackson stepped back without hesitation. "You lost your dignity the moment you mocked your own sister." I saw my mother freeze, rage flashing in her eyes. She rushed forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Jackson, at least let's talk this through." But Jackson had already turned away. He walked straight toward me and Ben, extending his hand. "Come on, Hannah. We don't need to stay here." I looked at his hand, then at Ben. My son nodded, his eyes glowing with hope. Without another moment of doubt, I took Jackson's hand. The three of us walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind Olivia's shrieks, my mother's furious voice, the hushed whispers of the guests, and a room that had descended into chaos. As we stepped outside, I looked up at the clear night sky, breathing in the crisp, cool air. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in years, I truly felt free. 1 year later, I stood in front of the glass doors of my new office, staring at the polished sign that read, HJ Financial Services. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the lettering. This wasn't just a company. It was the result of countless efforts, tears, and difficult decisions. I once thought my life would always be trapped under my mother's and Olivia's judgment, that I'd forever be the forgotten sister on the sidelines. But not anymore. I was no one's shadow now. Mom, I'm done. Ben's voice pulled me back to the present. I turned to see my son standing at the doorway, hands in his jacket pockets, a proud smile on his face. He'd grown taller, his face brighter. This past year had changed both of us. Are you sure this is your company? It looks so fancy, Ben said, wide-eyed, stepping inside and looking around in awe. I laughed. I'm sure, sweetheart. He nodded thoughtfully, then shrugged. Makes sense. You're the best, after all. That innocent compliment warmed me more than anything else could. I knelt down, straightening his collar, gazing into his bright, confident eyes. You're the best too, and I'm so proud of you. Ben grinned, but before he could say anything else, the office door opened. Jackson. He walked in holding a paper bag and 2 cups of hot coffee. Setting them on the desk, he handed one to me. Congratulations on your grand opening. I accepted the cup, feeling the warmth spread through my fingers. Thank you, Jackson. If it weren't for you, I might never have had the courage to do this. He shook his head, his gaze gentle. Hannah, you've always had it in you. You just needed to believe it yourself. I smiled, thinking back over everything that had happened in the past year. After that disastrous wedding, I cut ties completely with my mother and Olivia. At first they kept trying to reach out, especially my mom, but when I stopped giving in, she realized I'd truly stepped out of the path she had planned for me. As for Olivia, no one talked about her anymore. After the humiliating broken engagement, her reputation crumbled. Those who once flattered her distanced themselves. Her wealthy friends vanished, and she was forced to face life without anyone to lean on. My mother ended up in a similar position. Without flashy connections and financial support, she had to learn how to fend for herself. I heard she sold the mansion and moved into a small apartment. But I didn't care. I had chosen a different path. I left my old job and, with Jackson's support, started my own accounting firm. From a tiny office, I gradually built a reputation, and within just a few months, my business grew faster than I could have imagined. Jackson and I also grew closer. He didn't rush me, didn't pressure me to define our relationship right away. We took our time, learning each other, building something stronger than anything I'd ever had before. So, are we celebrating tonight? Jackson asked, bringing me back to the moment. I looked at him, then at Ben, and saw my son's eyes light up with excitement. Of course, but Ben gets to pick the place. Ben jumped up. Then pizza! And ice cream too! Jackson laughed, giving Ben a light pat on the back. I like your taste, kid. I stood there, watching the two of them chat happily, and suddenly felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I used to think my life was just a series of tragedies and losses, but now, I knew I had found another path. A path where I could take charge of my own life, where Ben could grow up surrounded by real love, and where, for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I walked over and wrapped my arm around my son's shoulders. Let's go. We've got a night to enjoy. The 3 of us left the office together, stepping out into the wide open world. A new world, filled with new beginnings. This Christmas was nothing like the ones before. I stood by the living room window, watching the first snowflakes of the season fall gently, blanketing the rooftops in white. The air was so still I could hear the soft crackling of firewood in the fireplace, and Ben's joyful laughter from the kitchen, where he was helping Jackson decorate gingerbread cookies. For the first time in many years, I felt truly at peace. The Christmas tree in the corner glowed with lights, neatly wrapped gifts placed underneath. No more lavish parties where I had to fake a smile. No more insults or cold stares from people who once called themselves my family. Just me, my son, and a man who had walked into my life unexpectedly and stayed with his whole heart. Hannah, can you come out here for a second? I turned around and saw Jackson standing in the center of the living room, his eyes softer than ever. Ben stood next to him, flashing a mischievous grin. Mom, hurry up! There was something in the way they looked at me that made my heart race. I stepped forward, feeling the cold air sneak through the window cracks. But inside, I was warm. Jackson took a deep breath and slowly pulled out a small velvet box. I froze. He opened it, revealing a ring with a sparkling emerald stone. I recognized it immediately. That's Claire's ring, I said, my voice shaking. Jackson nodded, his deep blue eyes filled with emotion. She once told me that when I met someone truly special, I should give her this ring. He paused for a moment, then continued, his voice steady but full of feeling. Hannah, you changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You were there for Claire in her final days. And now? You're here for me and Ben, making our lives better every single day. Ben tugged on my sleeve, his voice eager. Mom, say yes. I looked down and saw my son beaming, his eyes shining with joy. Happiness. Such a simple word, but one that had felt so far away for so long. I took a deep breath and looked into Jackson's sincere eyes. Are you sure? I asked, my voice trembling. Are you ready for this? A not-so-perfect family, a child who's not yours? Jackson squeezed my hand tightly. Family isn't about blood, Hannah. It's about the people who stay, who protect each other, and who love without conditions. Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, unable to find the words. So that means she said yes, right? Ben shouted, jumping up and down. Jackson smiled and gently slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I took a shaky breath and laughed as Ben danced around us like a little squirrel. This is the best Christmas ever. Jackson pulled me into his arms and whispered, Welcome to a real family, Hannah. I closed my eyes, sinking into his warm embrace. Outside, the snow kept falling, quietly, gently, marking the beginning of something new. A journey no longer taken alone, a life full of hope waiting ahead. And for the first time in my life, I knew I had found where I truly belonged. Hannah's story is not just a journey of breaking free from her family's control and disrespect, it's a testament to the power of self-worth and resilience. In life, we can't choose where we come from, but we can choose how we live, how we love, and how we protect our own values. Happiness doesn't come from being validated by others, it comes from recognizing our own worth. A real family isn't built solely on blood, but on respect, support, and unconditional love. What do you think about Hannah's journey? Have you ever experienced something similar in your own family, or witnessed someone fight to reclaim their self-worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories to come.